Hello everyone, welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we return to the rain-soaked forests, jagged coastlines, and shadowed mountain ranges of the Pacific Northwest with 7 of the most disturbing true wilderness horror stories you will ever hear. These are not campfire legends polished by generations, but first-hand confessions from people who stepped off the trail and into places where the map is more wish than reality. Some of them met predators wearing human faces. Others encountered something older than any town or logging road. And a few still are not certain what they saw stalking them between the trees. Every account in this episode has been traced back to an original source, cross-checked where possible against reports, local records, or matching patterns of incidents, and then reconstructed with care to preserve the voice of the person who lived through it. These are stories that do not tidy themselves up for your comfort. And in several cases, the wilderness kept more answers than it returned. If you value slow, atmospheric, and authentic horror that lingers long after the video ends, subscribe to Buried Files and activate notifications so you never miss our next descent into the unknown. After listening, share your own Pacific Northwest encounters in the comments. There is a certain kind of silence that only exists above the tree line. City people think they know quiet because they can hear their refrigerator hum at 3 in the morning, or the occasional siren a few blocks away. That is not silence. Real silence is when the world falls away in all directions, and the only sound left is your own pulse pushing blood past your ears. That is what I went looking for the summer I took the fire lookout job. I was 26, a graduate student with a half-finished thesis on environmental policy and a head full of static. My advisor said I was overthinking the framing. My friends said I needed a break. I told everyone I was going to spend 3 months at a remote fire lookout in the Oregon Cascades so I could focus on my research reading without distraction. The truth was more embarrassing. I wanted to disappear in a way that did not look like giving up. The tower had a name that sounded almost romantic on the assignment sheet, something like Eagle Crest, but the building itself was nothing more than a glass box on stilts at the top of a ridge. The only way in was a steep, switchbacking trail that took 3 hours with a heavy pack. Supply runs came twice a month, weather permitting. The rest of the time, it was just you, a radio, a pair of binoculars, and the sky. On my first day, the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio as I stood in the cab surrounded by windows. "Lookout, this is base. Radio check, over." I fumbled with the headset, the black plastic still warm from the last person's hands. "Base, this is Eagle Crest, reading you 5 by 5, over." My voice sounded too loud in the small room. Outside, the horizon ran in jagged blue waves, layer after layer of ridges fading into haze. Clouds hung like torn cotton over distant peaks. I felt both enormous and very, very small. The routine, once I learned it, was simple. Wake at dawn, check the sky, log weather conditions, scan the 360 degrees of forest with binoculars, looking for the one thing you did not want to see. A thin, unnatural column of smoke. Report hourly, or more if anything changed. Read, cook, pace, watch storms roll in or burn off. At night, call in a final status, then try to sleep in a bed that creaked with every breath of wind. The first week, the radio was my lifeline. Base check-ins, chatter from a couple of other lookouts perched on far ridges, the occasional helicopter pilot calling in position. The voices became familiar faster than I expected. A woman on the western ridge with a dry sense of humor, a guy to the south who always sounded like he was halfway through a joke. It was like living in your own private skybound neighborhood. The second week, I heard her for the first time. It was late afternoon, the kind of clear, heat shimmery day that makes every ridgeline look carved into glass. I had just finished logging a routine check. No smokes, light wind from the northwest, visibility excellent. I lifted my finger from the transmit button and started to set the headset down when I heard it. "Copy, Eagle Crest," base said. "Log received, base out." There was the usual pop of static at the end of the transmission. And then, faintly, so faintly I almost missed it, a second voice slipped in under the hiss. "Eagle Crest, 04137, 04137. The numbers were spoken in a woman's voice. Calm, precise, like someone reading coordinates off a map. The sound was so brief, I might have dismissed it as some kind of interference. But the cadence felt intentional, deliberate. I lifted the headset again. "Base, did you just repeat my coordinates?" I asked. There was a pause. "Negative, Eagle Crest," the dispatcher said. "Did you get a ghost on your end? We have some weird skip today. Could be bleed from the southern frequency. Do you copy? Over." I stared out at the ridges. "Yeah," I said. "I copy. Must be the atmosphere or something. Eagle Crest out." I hung the headset carefully on its hook, the plastic suddenly heavier in my hand. The coordinates she had repeated, because that is what it felt like, a repetition, were mine. The numbers I had just given base as my position. I told myself it was just a glitch. Radios do strange things in mountains. Signals bounce, cross, refract. That is what everyone says. That night, I woke to the sound of the wind shaking the tower. The windows rattled in their frames. Lightning flashed somewhere far off, turning the glass into momentary mirrors. Storms were part of the job. I had read the manual twice on what to do if a strike hit the tower. Stand on the insulated mat, keep your hands off metal, do not panic. The radio crackled. I rolled over, disoriented, and looked at the clock. 3:02 a.m. A soft hiss filled the cab. Then, clear as my own thoughts, the same woman's voice threaded through the static. 04137, 04137. Elevation 5892. Visibility compromised. The last word stretched slightly, as if distorted by distance. I slid from the bed and crossed the room in 3 steps, careful not to touch the metal table. My fingers shook as I lifted the headset. "This is Eagle Crest," I said. "Who is this?" "Repeat your identifier, over." The hiss rose, drowning out the last syllable. No reply. I stood there for a full minute, headset pressed to my ear, listening to nothing but the crackle of the storm. Eventually, I set it down and went through the motions. Check the lightning chart, log the time, remind myself that strange echoes happen all the time on these frequencies. Other lookouts talking to their bases, timber crews, pilots. But as I lay back down, the numbers she had spoken dragged through my mind like an anchor. 04137, my coordinates again, plus my elevation. The next morning, I flipped through the station notebook, looking for older entries. Each lookout leaves a record for the next. Weather notes, minor repairs, sketches, the occasional joke. As I paged back through years of cramped handwriting, I started to notice a pattern. Every so often, a lookout would mention odd radio traffic in the margins. Thought I heard a woman repeat my position. Skip? Static at 300. Could have sworn someone called the tower by name. Dreamt someone was in here with me, whispering coordinates. Maybe too much instant coffee. The notes were scattered, years apart, different handwriting. But they all had that same nervous, shrugging tone. No one had treated it like a real thing. Just weirdness. A ghost story to tell once you were off the mountain. I told myself I would not be like them. I would document everything. I would be rational. For a while, the voice stayed away. The storm passed. The days became a blur of heat, resin smell, and distant dust plumes from logging trucks. I fell into my own rhythms. I read until my eyes blurred. I wrote pages of my thesis longhand in a spiral notebook. In the evenings, I watched the sun melt into the horizon and thought that maybe I was healing in some hard-to-describe way. Then the voice came back, and it stopped being about coordinates. It was a week later, again around 3 a.m. I had started to dread that hour, when the night feels thickest. I woke abruptly, heart hammering, with a sense that someone had called my name. Not my last name, not my call sign, my first name, Elodie. The tower was dark except for the red eye of the radio power indicator. The sky outside was blank, starless, clouds blocking any moonlight. I listened. At first, nothing. Just the faint buzz of the fluorescent bulbs cooling overhead, the wind's low hum in the guy wires. Then, Elodie. It was the same voice, closer now. Not in the room, but not as distant as before, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. Elodie, copy. 04137. Alone. No smokes. Emotion. Restless. The last word lodged under my skin. Emotion. No one on the fire network talked like that. You reported facts, not feelings. I had written restless in my journal earlier that night, just before falling asleep. I had underlined it twice. I grabbed my notebook from the small shelf above the bed and flipped it open. The last entry was in my own scrawled handwriting. July 11th. Windy. No smokes. Feel restless. Like the tower is too small. Like something is pacing just beyond the windows. My palms went cold. This is Eagle Crest, I said hoarsely into the headset. Identify yourself. What is your location? Over. Silence. I forced myself to count to 30. If you are another lookout, you need to use proper protocol, I said. We can get your position logged. Do you copy? Over? Static rolled in like a wave, then ebbed. No response. In the morning, I called base as usual. I hovered over the transmit button, wondering if I should mention the unauthorized traffic. My brain lined up all the reasons not to. Maybe it was a prank on a neighboring frequency. Maybe I was half asleep and misheard wind gusts. Maybe. Eagle Crest, this is base, the dispatcher said. You are a little late with your first check. Everything good up there? Over? I looked at the ring of distant mountains. Everything is fine, I said. No smokes. Good visibility. Eagle Crest out. I wished, the moment I said it, that I had told the truth as I felt it. That something up here had learned my name. The next time the voice came, it bypassed the radio entirely. It was evening. Sunset had spilled itself across the sky, bruised purple and molten orange. I had done my last scan, logged the nothingness, and sat down at the rickety table with my notebook. I decided I would take control of the narrative the way any good researcher does, by collecting data. I wrote down the times the voice had appeared, what it had said, the weather conditions. I noted that it seemed fond of 3 a.m., that it repeated coordinates, that it had begun to mimic my private writing. I wrote one more line, the question I did not want to admit I was asking. What do you want? The radio hissed, though I had not touched it. Eagle Crest, the woman's voice murmured. Not in my ears, but in my head, as clearly as if she stood behind me. What do you want? I froze. The pen slipped from my hand and rolled across the table. She continued, her tone observational, almost clinical. Subject, Elodie. Duration, on station, 15 days. Sleep disrupted. Effect, anxious. Desire, to vanish without vanishing. "No," I whispered. That is not how this works." My reflection stared back at me from the darkening windows, pale and hollow-eyed. I stood abruptly and walked to the cabinet where the old logbooks and manuals were stored. My hands moved before my thoughts caught up. I hauled out a water-warped binder labeled Incident Reports and flipped it open. Most of it was dry bureaucracy. Minor injuries, lightning strikes, equipment failures. But in the middle, clipped between pages with a rusted paperclip, was a photocopied newspaper article. "Local lookout missing in storm, search crew suspended after 5 days." The photo below the headline showed a woman leaning against the rail of a lookout tower. Wind whipped her hair back from a determined face. The caption named her Beatrice D. I read the article. She had been assigned to a different tower, one that no longer existed, 2 ridges over. A freak storm had blown up. Radio contact was lost. By the time a ground team fought its way to the tower, the cab was empty. The logbook entries stopped abruptly mid-sentence. No signs of a fall, no footprints leading away. It was as if she had stepped out of existence. The date was 21 years ago. The coordinates listed for her tower were not the same as mine, but close enough that we would have seen the same storms. My skin prickled. I looked at the last page of her recovered notes, reproduced in the file. The final line, incomplete. 0300, heard voice repeating. No more. The radio headset sat on its hook, innocuous, black plastic catching the last light. I did not touch it. I did not say her name aloud. That night, the storm came without lightning. The wind rose, howling around the tower, making the structure shudder on its stilts. Clouds swallowed every star. At 3 a.m., like a clock striking, the radio came alive. "Eagle Crest, do you copy?" The woman's voice said. Not bass, not any call sign I recognized. Just me. I stayed in bed, blanket pulled to my chin, watching the dim red eye of the radio glow. "You should respond," she said gently. "They will mark you as non-responsive." "Who are you?" I whispered. A soft, humorless laugh. "I am what you came up here to become," she said. "Signal with no source, coordinates with no body, a voice logged on paper after the fact." The wind rattled the windows. The tower creaked. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. "You repeat my coordinates," I said. "You read my journal." "I keep track," she replied, "of who is alone, of who wants out, of who is already half gone." Something shifted at the edge of my vision. For a moment, I thought I saw a pale figure reflected in the glass, standing just behind my shoulder. Not fully formed, more suggestion than person. Hair blown back by an unseen wind, eyes like distant storms. "If you step outside now," she said softly, "no one will know which way you went. There will be reports, searches. The logs will be photocopied. You will be written down more thoroughly than you have ever written yourself. You will belong to this place." My hand found the rough grain of the wooden wall beside the bed. Splinters bit into my palm. "I do not want that," I said. My voice shook. "I thought I did, but I do not." Silence stretched. The wind moaned in the guy wires like a low human cry. "Then you will have to go back," she said at last. "All the way back, to the city, to your unfinished life. You will not sleep as well. The noise will never be this clean. But when you wake at 3 a.m., you will still be inside your own walls." The radio fell quiet. The light on its face dimmed to a pinprick. My contract was for 3 months. I lasted another 6 days. I called base and told them I was having health issues. Anxiety, trouble sleeping, intrusive thoughts. All true, if not the whole truth. They were understaffed and clearly annoyed, but they arranged for a relief lookout. On the day I left, I carried the incident binder with Beatrice's article to the edge of the desk, hesitated, then pushed it back. Someone else would need it more than I did. The hike down felt longer than the hike up. With each switchback, the air grew thicker, filled with insects and the smell of damp soil. I turned once, halfway down, and looked back at the tiny square of the tower against the sky. It looked fragile from that angle, like something a gust could peel off the ridge. For a moment, I thought I heard a faint crackle in my pack, as if the radio I had already turned in were still with me. A whisper of numbers. 04137. I kept walking. Back in the city, people asked me how it was. They wanted romantic stories about sunsets and thunderheads, about solitude and inspiration. I gave them what they expected. I talked about the views and the storms and the time I watched a family of deer pick their way along a ridge at dawn. I did not talk about the woman who had learned my name. It has been 2 years. I finished my thesis. I sleep mostly through the night. Mostly. Sometimes, at 3 a.m., I jerk awake in my apartment, heart racing, sure that someone has just repeated my address in a calm, observational voice. When that happens, I lie very still and listen. There is always noise here. Traffic on the arterial, a neighbor's plumbing, the refrigerator kicking on. Ordinary human sounds. But underneath, if I listen long enough, I can still feel that other silence. The kind that drapes itself over mountaintops and abandoned towers. The kind that waits. There are new lookouts up there now. New names, new notebooks, new private worries. On dry days, when the wildfire maps explode with red polygons, I check the updates more often than I should. Sometimes there are small lines in the incident summaries. Brief comms interruption at 300. Unidentified transmission on channel. I wonder if they will write it off the way I tried to. I wonder if any of them will open the incident binder and see Beatrice's photo, standing where I stood. I wonder how many times she will patiently repeat their coordinates back to them before somebody answers. It is strange to say that the worst thing that ever happened to me began with what felt like a fresh start. I had just turned 23, burned out from city life in Portland and tired of staring at spreadsheets in a windowless office. The Pacific Northwest had always felt like a postcard outside the glass, and all I ever did was look at it on my computer's lock screen. So when a seasonal trail maintenance position opened up in a national forest in Washington, I took it without hesitation. I told my parents I needed clean air and open sky. What I actually needed was to feel small in a place that was larger than my anxiety. The town where the ranger station sat was little more than a main street, a shuttered mill, and a bar whose neon beer signs never seemed to turn off. I arrived in late May, when the snow still clung to the high ridges, but the lower trails were opening up. Housing was included, which sounded ideal when you have barely any savings. They put all of us seasonal workers in an old bunkhouse a few miles from the station, tucked into the trees off a gravel road. The first night I stood outside with my duffel bag, listening to the wind comb through fir branches and the distant rush of the river. And I thought, this is exactly what I needed. Inside, the bunkhouse smelled like damp wood and coffee. There were 4 of us that season. 2 guys who had done this before and talked in shorthand about SAW certifications and trail numbers, a woman from Utah who was there mostly to climb every off day, and then 1 other new hire like me. His name was Oliver. Oliver kept to himself almost from the first minute. He chose the bunk in the far corner near the small window, lined up his gear with military precision, and answered questions with polite, clipped sentences. Dark hair, pale skin like he spent more time in libraries than in the sun, eyes that never quite met yours for more than a second. I told myself he was just shy. Not everyone fills empty rooms with chatter the way I do when I am nervous. During training, the four of us learned chainsaw safety, crosscut saw technique, how to clear blowdowns, how to deal with weekend hikers who think moderate means flip-flops. We also learned, almost as a side note, that this forest had its share of missing persons. People who underestimated distances, who got disoriented in sudden weather, who decided that an unmarked game trail looked interesting. Our supervisor mentioned them the way someone mentions a bad winter storm from years ago. A fact tragic but not immediately relevant. The first time I went out on a trail crew with Oliver, I noticed how much he watched people. At the first major trailhead, cars were lined up in the gravel turnout, condensation still fogging the glass from breath. We checked the signboard, the fresh boot prints in the mud, the register where people were supposed to write their names, and planned routes. Most did not bother. As we unloaded tools from the truck, I saw Oliver's eyes drift from face to face, resting briefly on each group. A couple with brand new packs, a solo guy with minimal gear and expensive trail runners, a family whose two teenagers already looked exhausted. Busy for a weekday, I said, more to break the silence than anything. Oliver nodded. Good visibility today. Hard to get lost when the sky's like this. It sounded like a normal comment, but something in his tone made me glance at him. His expression was unreadable. Those first weeks settled into a rhythm. Up before dawn, coffee, loading tools, long drives on washboard roads, hours of clearing brush and cutting deadfall. At night, my shoulders ached in a way that felt clean and earned. The bunkhouse would fill with the hiss of the gas stove, wet socks hanging from every exposed beam, and the muffled laughter from the others playing cards at the main table. Oliver usually sat apart, reading or meticulously sharpening his tools. If he spoke at length about anything, it was the layout of the forest. He seemed to carry a map in his head. He knew which creeks ran high after rain, which slopes held snow late into summer, which unofficial shortcuts locals used to reach fishing spots. At first, I admired it. I asked him about alternate routes when we were hiking out, and my legs felt like rubber, and he always knew one. You have a good sense of direction, I said once, trying again to reach whatever part of him lived behind those pale eyes. He shrugged. You pay attention, or you disappear out here, that is all. The first small thing that bothered me happened in the third week. A notice went up on the corkboard at the station about a hiker who had not returned from a weekend trip. Male, late 30s, last seen at the same trailhead we used for one of our longer routes. It was not yet a full search, more of a, if you see him, radio in kind of alert. The photos showed a man with an easy smile and a distinctive blue water bottle clipped to his pack. 2 days later, I was outside the bunkhouse, rummaging in the back of our rig for a spare pair of gloves when I saw it. The same style of blue water bottle, scuffed in the same places in the photo, lying in a milk crate of miscellaneous gear in the truck bed. At first, I thought maybe it was coincidence. That style was common enough. But when I picked it up, there was a faint outline of a sticker that had been peeled away. In the missing hiker's photo, the sticker had been a small mountain logo. I hesitated, then carried it inside. Someone lose a bottle? I asked, holding it up. One of the returning guys looked over. Must be from last season. Lost and found, maybe. Just toss it in the kitchen. Someone will use it. Oliver glanced up from his book, eyes flicking to the bottle and then away. People forget things all the time, he said. There was nothing in his voice to grab onto, nothing you could call off. I set the bottle in the kitchen and tried not to think about it. The search notice came down a week later. No one said whether the man had been found. As July crept closer, the forest filled with more people and more stories. 2 teenage girls left their map in the car and needed to be walked out before dark. A trail runner sprained his ankle 4 miles from the parking lot. A family misread the loop length and trudged back to their SUV long after sunset, parents snapping at each other in exhaustion. Each time, we heard different versions over the radio. Facts scrambled by panic and the weak signal that bounced off the ridges. If this were just a story about the randomness of wilderness accidents, I probably would not be telling it. But it is not. The second thing that happened was harder to dismiss. We had just finished a long day clearing a trail that climbed up to a fire lookout. My arms were jelly, my face sunburned across the nose. When we rolled back into the bunkhouse driveway, the others went inside, but I stayed a minute to stretch and finish my water. Oliver remained by the truck, tailgate down, inventorying tools the way he always did. As he shifted a tarp aside, something slid and hit the bed with a dull thud. A backpack, old, dirty, with a rip across the top pocket. There was something about it that made my stomach clench. I had seen that pack before, hanging on the missing equipment board at the ranger station as an example of what not to buy. Cheap, off-brand, unreliable buckles. The supervisor had told a quick story about a hiker whose pack tore open on a steep section and how half his gear tumbled down a gully. "Where did you get that?" I asked. Oliver did not look up. "It was at the trailhead. Probably someone left it by the trash. People dump gear they do not want to pack out." The answer came too quickly. I stepped closer. The fabric was stained with something darker than mud. I wanted to believe it was spilled coffee or sap, but the pattern looked wrong. My heart pounded in my ears. "We should turn it in," I said, "in case it belongs to someone on the missing list." At that, he did look up. His face was calm, almost amused. "You think every piece of junk in this truck belongs to a missing person?" His eyes held mine for longer than they ever had before. "If you think that way, you will not sleep out here." He tossed the pack back under the tarp with a careless flick, as if it were truly just trash. I did not say anything else, but that night, lying awake in my bunk, listening to the others snore, I kept seeing that stain. I started to notice more small coincidences after that. A GPS unit appearing on the bunkhouse table, its battery barely holding enough charge to display a saved track that cut sharply away from a main trail into blank space. A pair of trekking poles with fluorescent tape at the handles that matched ones in a printed bulletin about people to contact if seen. None of it was proof. None of it, on its own, was enough to call anyone. But together, they settled like stones in my gut. The day everything crystallized, the sky was a flat, unbroken gray. Low clouds dragged across the ridges like wet cotton. Our supervisor split us into pairs and sent Oliver and me to clear blowdowns on a lightly used trail that climbed the east side of a remote basin. We worked mostly in silence, the whine of the saw filling the space between us. Around mid-afternoon, as we rested on a log and drank lukewarm water, Oliver spoke. "There is a shortcut from here," he said. "If we take it, we can loop back to the truck without having to retrace our steps." "Shortcut?" I pulled out my folded map. Our position was roughly halfway along the trail. On paper, the only way in or out was the way we had come. He tapped a point off to the right of the trail, where the contour lines bunched close together. Old logging spur. Not on the map anymore, but it is still there. Locals use it to reach the river. Saves an hour. I hesitated. The day was wearing on. The clouds had lowered, and a damp chill crept under my shirt. The idea of shaving time off the hike was tempting. Still, something in me balked at stepping off the line printed on the map. "Is it marked?" I asked. He smiled, thin and humorless. "Not officially, but I have been there many times. You can trust me." You can trust me. I wish I could say that line alone made me refuse. It did not. It was the combination of fatigue, the promise of an earlier dinner, and the unjustified belief that nothing truly bad was going to happen to me. I folded the map. "Lead the way," I said. We left the trail at a small break in the underbrush that I never would have noticed on my own. The ground sloped down, soft with needles, and soon the sense of direction I had been carefully building all season began to fray. The spur road he had mentioned was more of a ghost. Twin ruts barely visible under ferns and salal, cut by time and erosion. The trees grew close, their trunks draped in moss that swallowed sound. Within minutes, the trail we had left might as well have been in another country. "How much farther?" I asked. "Not long," he said. "You will hear the river soon." The deeper we went, the more that familiar unease returned, that prickling awareness at the base of my skull. Oliver walked a half step ahead, his stride unhurried. The saw rode on his shoulder, like an extension of his body. There was an easy confidence in the way he moved, like someone following a route rehearsed many times. I thought of the missing hiker's water bottle, the backpack, the GPS track leading into nothing. "Do you ever think about them?" I asked, surprising myself. "Who?" he said without turning. "The ones who go missing out here." He considered this. Sometimes, people romanticize the idea of vanishing into the woods. They do not realize it is mostly dumb choices. "Dumb choices," I repeated. "Like following an unmarked spur road?" He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "You followed me." The trees opened suddenly into a small clearing, no bigger than a living room. The ground here was scraped bare in places, blackened with old fire pits. Charred cans and melted plastic lay half buried in the dirt. It looked like the kind of unofficial campsite teenagers used to drink at and leave behind. In the center, there was a low pile of debris. At first, I thought it was just trash. Twisted metal, shredded fabric, half-burned nylon. Then I saw the outline of a boot. Its sole melted into a warped, tar-like smear. A strip of once bright jacket material fused to the rock, the faint, sickly sweet scent that did not belong to wood smoke. My breath caught. "What is this?" My voice sounded thin in my own ears. Oliver set the saw down gently, as if we had reached some prearranged destination. "People come out here," he said. "They get lost, they get hurt. Sometimes they are never found. The forest keeps what it is given." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach flip. It was not madness, not the way movies show it. It was something colder, a kind of clinical interest. "How did you find this place?" I asked. "Same way as you," he said softly. "I followed someone I thought I could trust." He took a small step toward me. The clearing felt suddenly very far from any road, any trail, any radio signal. The clouds pressed lower, muting the light. Noise seemed to be swallowed before it could reach the treetops. "I left a note," I blurted, the words tumbling out before I even realized I had planned them. "Back at the bunkhouse, told them which trail we were on, what time we were due back." That was not entirely true. I had scribbled something quickly on the whiteboard that morning, more out of habit than fear. But I said it with the certainty of someone delivering a verdict. For a moment, nothing changed. Then a sound split the quiet. a sharp crack like a door being slammed. It took me a second to realize it was coming from above, somewhere back toward the main trail. A second later, the forest echoed with the distant bark of a radio tone, followed by a faint voice we could not quite hear. Oliver's head turned toward the sound. His jaw tightened just enough for me to see. "Looks like they are checking in," I said, forcing my voice to steady. "We are late." The spell broke, if that is what it had been. He glanced back at me, something shuddering behind his eyes. "We should go," he said. "Weather is changing." We climbed back toward the main trail in a silence so thick it felt like a third presence between us. My legs shook, more from adrenaline than effort. When we finally stepped back onto the honest dirt of the official route, the familiar blaze markers on the trees looked like lifelines. We reached the truck just as our supervisor was radioing again, asking for our location. I let Oliver answer, his voice steady, giving approximate coordinates, no mention of our detour, no mention of the clearing. That night, I sat on my bunk with my packed duffel at my feet. The decision had crystallized somewhere between that burned pile of gear and the first white blaze on the trail back. I went into town the next morning and told my supervisor there was a family emergency. I did not give details. He did not press. I was gone within 48 hours. It has been 3 years. I live in a different state now, in a city big enough that the horizon is made of buildings instead of ridgelines. I still hike, but only on crowded trails where you can always see someone else's brightly colored jacket ahead of you. I still wake some nights convinced I can smell that faint, sickly sweetness of burned plastic and something else. I check news alerts for that forest more than I care to admit. Last winter, an article popped up in my feed about a cluster of unresolved disappearances in that region, enough to spark a small media flurry before vanishing under more immediate headlines. There was a photo of a familiar trailhead, cars lined up in the gravel turnout, people smiling, shouldering packs, unaware of the trees watching them. I studied every face in the picture, searching for Oliver. He was not there. I do not know if that is better or worse. My grandmother used to say the forest remembers every bargain you make with it. When I was a kid, spending sticky summers in her little coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, I thought that sounded cozy, like the woods were a big old aunt keeping track of birthday presents. Only later did I understand that she meant every bargain, even the ones you do not realize you are making. Her house sat above a stretch of second-growth timber and swampy creek beds, with a single rough trail leading down into what everyone simply called the green. On the wall above her kitchen table hung a faded photograph of a cedar stump so massive 3 children could stand shoulder to shoulder inside the hollow. She called it the mother. In her stories, loggers who took more than they needed or hunters who killed for sport always found their way back to that stump in the end. Sometimes alive, sometimes not. I forgot those stories for years, the way you forget lullabies. Then, after the accident, they came back all at once. The accident was 3 sentences in the news. A drunk driver, a rainy night, someone else's taillights spinning out of view. My partner, Daniel, walked away with a concussion and a jag of glass in his shoulder. The other driver did not walk away at all. After the court dates and the insurance calls and the endless parade of people saying it could have been worse, we were both left with the same unspoken question. Why did we get to keep going when someone else did not? I was the one who suggested going back to my grandmother's town. She had been gone for years by then, the house sold to a couple from Seattle, but the forest was still there. I told myself we would hike the old trails, breathe the salt and cedar, and somehow drain the poison out of our heads. We followed the same rough path from the highway turnout, past the blackberry tangle and the rusted fence post that had been there since I was 8. The green swallowed us quicker than I remembered. Salal leaves brushed our knees. Slanted shafts of light turned dust motes into slow, falling stars. Daniel walked ahead, shoulders hunched, the scar on his temple a pale crescent against his tan. The clearing was not where it used to be. Or maybe the forest had shifted around it. We almost walked past it entirely. One moment there were trees on all sides, the next we stepped into a ring of open light, and there it was. The mother had rotted in the years since that kitchen photograph. The stump was still enormous, taller than my chest, but the wood was furred with moss, its heart eaten out into a dark, damp bowl. Someone had been here recently. Glass jars of berries and coins sat along the rim. A rusted chainsaw blade rested like an offering at the base, and pinned under a stone, edges curling from the damp, was a missing person flyer. The man's face looked tired and kind. Local logger still missing after 3 weeks. These things get everywhere, Daniel muttered, looking away. You okay? I asked. He was already kneeling beside the stump. I dream about this place, he said softly. I did not know what it was, but this shape, like something waiting with its hands out. He touched the moss with the tips of his fingers. For a second, I wanted to pull him back, the way you grab a child reaching for a hot pan. Maybe we should go, I said. We can come back another day. Or we can ask it, he said, not looking at me. Like your grandmother would. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I had never told him half of those childhood stories. I opened my mouth to say so and tasted cedar and iron on my tongue. We have nothing to give? I managed. He stood slowly and turned to me. His eyes were wet, but not with tears. It was like the color had loosened inside them. We have too much, he said. That is the problem. We did not kneel or chant or cut our palms. There was no ritual. We just stood there, the two of us and the stump and the silent trees. In my head, words arranged themselves without my consent. Take this weight. Take the nights where he wakes up choking. Take the replay of headlights and metal. Take the fact that we are still here when that man is not. The forest listened. I felt it. The way you feel a room listen when you say something you cannot take back. On the hike out, Daniel walked lighter than I had seen him in months. He talked about small things. Coffee shops back home, a movie he wanted to see. How he should call his sister. The knot between his shoulders had loosened as if cut. I, on the other hand, felt like someone had poured wet sand into my bones. Each step was an effort. By the time we reached the car, my hands were shaking. You look pale, he said, frowning. Maybe I am the one who needed this trip less. He drove us back to the city. I watched the green strip past the window and had the irrational thought that if I blinked too long, the trees would be inside the car with us. The nightmares started that week. Not of the accident. Those had been Daniel's, but of wood splitting open. In the dreams, I stood in that clearing as the cedar stump flexed, its rotten heart cracking to reveal faces pressed into the grain. Eyes and mouths, and the faint white half-moon of teeth, all layered like growth rings. Some I recognized from news articles I had skimmed and forgotten. Others were strangers. All of them looked at me with the same exhausted relief, as if I had finally shown up for my shift. You gave it to him, a voice said. My grandmother's, from nowhere and everywhere. You did not think about what it wanted from you. I woke with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Daniel improved. He started sleeping through the night, They stopped flinching when a car backfired or someone dropped a pan. The guilt that had lived in his shoulders thinned into something manageable. He signed up for a night class. He laughed sometimes from his whole chest. I stopped going outside alone. It took me a while to realize the pattern. Rain made it worse. On wet mornings, every street tree felt like a spine at my back. Cedar, fir, even the sad little ornamental things in sidewalk squares, all of them seemed to lean in when I passed. More than once I thought I heard a low creak above me, followed by a soft, damp sigh. I tried to ignore it. I walked in the middle of the sidewalk. I took buses instead of cutting through the small park near our apartment. The city was not a forest, I told myself. Concrete and traffic and a scattering of trees were nothing compared to the endless green of home. Then, one gray afternoon, I made the mistake of cutting through that park anyway. It was faster. I was late. My umbrella was dripping in my hand. The path curved between a cluster of cedars someone had planted years ago to make the space feel less sterile. I got 3 steps in before the world narrowed. The air grew thick, heavy with the same damp rot smell as that stump. My ears popped. The sound of the street faded into a dull hum. For a second, the trunks around me seemed wider, older, their bark ridged into familiar lines. I stopped walking. The sense of being watched pressed in from all sides, intimate and impersonal at once. A weight settled across my shoulders. Not hands, exactly. But not hands. You owe. Something breathed. Not in words, but in the same way a storm cloud promises rain. I backed out of the trees the way you back away from an animal you do not want to spook. When I reached the sidewalk, the spell snapped. The sounds of the city rushed back in. Horns, footsteps, someone laughing into their phone. The cedars behind me looked small and harmless. Their branches shivered in the drizzle like any other trees. I did not tell Daniel. How do you say? The forest followed us, and it is asking for the rest of what I promised. He is doing well. He volunteers with a road safety group now. Sometimes he talks about going back up the coast when the weather is nice, maybe taking a few days to hike those old trails you used to love. I always change the subject. I know this sounds irrational. Trauma does strange things. I could go back to therapy and put all of this under tidy labels. Survivor's guilt, projection, magical thinking. But when I imagine stepping under cedar branches again alone, my body answers before my brain can. My throat tightens. My palms sweat. My feet stay rooted to the pavement. My grandmother used to say the forest remembers every bargain you make with it. I did not understand that there is no partial payment. You do not get to drop your guilt at an old stump and walk away clean. Some days I feel like I am living on borrowed ground, a patch of concrete on top of roots that go much deeper than the pipes and cables underneath. On those days, I do not look up. I do not want to see whether the city's trees are leaning just slightly in my direction, waiting for the moment I step far enough away from the crowds for the mother to call the rest of the debt due. The thing about traditions is that you never really expect them to end. You assume there will always be another summer, another long drive, another set of half-drunk photos taken in the same crooked cabin by the same crooked lake. That is what that place was for us. Proof that no matter how complicated life got in the city, there was still one patch of water and trees that belonged only to our little group. We started going to Cedar Glass Lake the summer after college. It was not on any of the big top 10 alpine lakes lists, which we liked. You reached it by following a pitted forest road in Washington until it narrowed into a tunnel of spruce, then taking a footpath that dropped you into a bowl of blue surrounded by dark slopes. The campground was tiny, just a handful of sites tucked among the trees. No cell service, no motorboats. Just the soft slap of water on rocks and the occasional loon call echoing off the cliffs. By the time everything happened, we had been coming back for 7 years. Same time each August, same group. Me, our unofficial planner, Nate and Mia, perpetually almost breaking up. Quiet, steady Jonah, and Harriet. Harriet was the one who loved the lake the most, I think. She was the loudest person in any room, the first in the water, no matter how cold. The one who insisted on night swims under the stars with cheap glow sticks tied to our wrists. She had grown up in landlocked suburbs. The lake, she used to joke, was the closest thing to a religion she had. That last year, she was different. I noticed it even before we left the city, when she slid into the passenger seat beside me. Normally, she would be buzzing, playlist already queued, cramming gas station snacks into the door pocket. Instead, she just buckled up and stared out the windshield, fingers tapping a silent rhythm on her knee. "You okay?" I asked as we pulled onto the highway. "Fine," she said. "Just tired." Her voice had a papery quality I did not like. I assumed it was work or some new mess with the on-again, off-again ex she never quite cut loose. I decided to give her space and let the miles unspool in front of us. We rolled into camp late afternoon. Sun slanted across the water, turning it that deep, glassy green that gave the lake its name. While we were pitching tents, Jonah called us over to the bulletin board near the vault toilets. "Look at this," he said. Pinned up among the usual fire warnings and park regulations was a photocopied newspaper clipping. The paper had wrinkled from damp, the ink slightly blurred. "Local family presumed drowned after boat overturns, search suspended at Cedar Glass Lake." The photo showed a man, a woman, and a little boy in life jackets, all squint smiling at the camera from the shore. The article itself was old, from the 1970s, yellowed at the edges. Someone had underlined a paragraph in blue pen. Despite calm conditions, no bodies were recovered. Locals have long regarded the lake as deeper than it looks. I glanced at Harriet. She was staring at the picture so hard her jaw twitched. "Super comforting," Mia said dryly. "Real fun vibe, Forest Service." "It is probably some seasonal ranger's idea of a safety PSA," I said. "Wear your life jackets, kids, or you will end up on the corkboard." But that night, sitting around the fire, I caught Harriet glancing again and again toward the dark outline of the bulletin board, like it was a person standing just outside the circle of light. The second day was for the water. That was the rule. No hikes, no side trips, just the lake. We lazed on inflatable tubes. We took turns on the battered canoe that came with our sight. We let the sun bake the city out of our bones. For a few hours, it almost felt like every other year. Later, as the sky bruised into purple and the trees dissolved into silhouette, Harriet asked me to go out on the canoe with her. "One more time before it gets full dark." "Take a headlamp," Jonah called after us. "Last thing we need is to star in that bulletin board article, part 2. Harriet did not laugh. She just shoved the canoe into the water and climbed in with a sharp, purposeful movement. I followed, kneeling to keep us steady as we pushed off. We paddled without speaking at first, the boat cutting a V of ripples into the smooth surface. Camp lights dwindled behind us. The familiar chorus of frogs and insects rose from the shoreline. Far across the lake, a loon called, that long, mournful note that always made the hairs on my arms stand up. We drifted into the middle, where the water felt wider than it looked from shore. The last of the sunset smeared itself in a faint strip above the hills. The first stars tested the dark. "That article," Harriet said suddenly. "You remember it said they never found them?" "Yeah," I said. "Decades ago, though. This place has probably been searched a dozen times since." "You ever wonder," she continued, eyes fixed on the mirror's smooth water, "why it always feels like there is something just under the surface here?" I laughed weakly. "Wow, that is a great thing to say to the person in the front of the canoe." "I am serious," she said. "Does it not feel full? Like it is not just water down there?" I wanted to make a joke, say something about fish and drowned trees, but the words stuck. My paddle dipped and rose, dripping silver. The sound changed first. I did not notice it go quiet. That is the strange thing. One moment everything was normal. Frogs, a distant car on the far access road, a faint rush from the inlet stream. The next, my brain stumbled on a sudden absence. I lifted my paddle and let it rest across my knees. "Do you hear that?" I asked. "What?" Harriet said, though I knew by her face that she heard it too. "Nothing," I said. "That is the problem. No frogs, no insects, no cars. Even the air felt denser, as if pressed in on all sides by invisible hands. The only sound left was the soft lap of water against the hull and our own breathing. For the first time since we had pushed off, Harriet looked straight at me. Her eyes were too bright in the dim. "I read that article online before we came," she said. "Not just the clipping, the full thing. It was weirder than that board version made it sound. People on the search crews swore they saw things down there on sonar, shapes that did not move right. They drained part of the lake one winter. It did not get shallower in the middle. It just changed." "You are freaking me out," I said, half annoyed. "If this is some setup to jump scare me, it is working. Congratulations." She did not smile. She leaned over the side of the canoe a little, as if to look deeper into the water. "Do you ever feel like something has been waiting for you?" she asked quietly. "Not in a metaphorical way? Specifically you?" The echo of her words trembled across the lake, too clear in the unnatural stillness. "Harriet, sit back," I said. "You are going to tip us." She ignored me. In the reflection, I saw us doubled. Two pale faces floating on black, the canoe a thin line between. Then, as I watched, the reflected canoe stuttered. For a second, it lagged behind the real one, then snapped back into sync. It happened again when I blinked, like a video buffer hitching on a bad connection. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Harriet nodded. "They finally picked me," she said. Before I could ask what that meant, she leaned farther, so abruptly the canoe lurched. My reaction was pure instinct. I flung myself to the opposite side to counterbalance. The boat rocked, water slapping against the hull. Then she was gone. There was no splash. That is the part that will never make sense to me. 1 second, Harriet's weight was in front of me, her hands on the gunwale. The next, the canoe bobbed empty. The water where she had been was smooth as glass, our twin reflections undisturbed. "Harriet?" The word tore out of me, too loud in that suffocating quiet. I dropped to my knees and plunged my arms into the water, digging for anything, fabric, skin, hair. My fingers closed on nothing but cold. I yelled until my throat burned, her name bouncing off the dark slopes and coming back smaller each time. By the time the others reached us in the second canoe, the sounds of the world had started to seep back in. A frog croaked tentatively near the shore. An engine growled somewhere on the road. The spell, if that is what it was, had lifted. We called, we searched, we thrashed through reeds along the bank with flashlights stabbing at the water. Rangers came, divers came. They combed every inch they could reach. By dawn, the far shore looked like a crime scene from a show. Yellow tape, muddy footprints, exhausted faces. The official story settled quickly, like silt. She must have fallen in. Darkness, disorientation, shock. Even good swimmers can go under fast. These things happen, people said, as if that were any comfort. We drove home without her. Grief counselors talk about bargaining, about the mind replaying events with different outcomes. I did that for months. If I had refused the last paddle, if I had grabbed her arm faster, if we had chosen a different weekend, a different lake. What I do not tell them is that sometimes, in the shower or passing a darkened shop window, I see my reflection drag a half beat behind me, just enough for my stomach to drop. It always catches up, but in that moment, I feel the same thick, waiting silence rise up around me. A year after it happened, I went back to Cedar Glass Lake alone. I do not know what I thought I was going to accomplish. Closure, maybe. Punishment. I hiked down to the water's edge and stood where our canoe had first pushed off. The bulletin board still held the old article about the family from the 70s, corners now curled and soft. Under it, someone had tacked a new missing poster with Harriet's face. The paper was fresh, the ink not yet blurred by rain. I did not get in a boat. I did not even step on the wet rocks. I just stood there listening. The lake sounded normal. Birds, insects, wind. Ordinary life. Only once, when a cloud passed over the sun, did everything muffle for a second, leaving me alone with the hush. In that thin pocket of quiet, I felt watched from below. People tell me lakes are just water and depth and physics. I nod. I agree out loud. But I know what real silence feels like now, the kind that is not the absence of noise, but the presence of something listening. I moved inland after that. I rent an apartment on a hill far from any real body of water. There is a small retention pond down the block that gathers rain in winter. I cross the street to avoid walking beside it. It is barely 10 feet across, a puddle by any reasonable measure. But when the surface is still, I cannot bring myself to look down. I am afraid that one day, if I do, I will see two versions of myself staring back. The one standing on the bank, and the one a half second behind, waiting patiently for the water to go quiet enough to take my place. The job that almost got me killed did not look dangerous on paper. It was a contract position with a delivery company that serviced cabins and research sites along decommissioned logging roads in Oregon. I told myself it was temporary, just something to plug the hole in my bank account after my last office job evaporated. I also told myself I had always been good with maps and that being alone in the woods felt more honest than being alone in a cubicle. Most days, it really was simple. I would load the truck at dawn, punch my route into the handheld GPS, and spend the rest of the day following a web of gravel roads that snaked into the foothills. Packages were mostly boring: tools, non-perishable food, replacement parts. The roads were not. Some still had faded Forest Service numbers nailed to trees. Others were unofficial tracks locals had carved out with decades of truck tires, unmarked on any map. It was on one of those unmarked spurs that I met Callum. The first time, he appeared as a silhouette in the dust ahead of me. A man in a faded green jacket and ball cap, hand raised in a casual wave. I slowed on reflex. He stepped off to the side and waited until I pulled even. "You the new delivery driver?" he asked. His voice had that soft Pacific Northwest drawl, vowels rounded by rain. "Guess so," I said. I am still learning the roads? He smiled, just enough to show teeth. Everyone is, he said. Roads change out here more than people think. He told me he lived up near the ridge and sometimes flagged trucks when tourists got stuck or a tree came down. He gave me directions around a washout that had eaten half the road a mile ahead. They were accurate. When I checked the updated route later, I realized he had shaved nearly 40 minutes off my day. After that, I saw him a lot. He would appear at junctions just as I was pulling out a map, leaning against a stump or a boulder like he had been there all afternoon. He always knew where I was headed before I told him. Cabin with the blue tarp roof. Stay left at the fork, right at the busted culvert, he would say. Or, research station with the weather tower. Do not bother with the old bridge. It is rotten. There is a newer crossing upstream. At first, I was grateful. The handheld GPS only knew so much. The company's paper maps were old photocopies of older maps. Callum seemed to have the whole network memorized, not just the main lines, but the forgotten spurs and skid roads. You must have grown up out here, I said once, when he hopped up onto my bumper to sit while we shared a lukewarm thermos of coffee. You could say that, he replied. I pay attention. That is how you stay alive in country that does not care if you are breathing. I laughed, but he did not. The small things started to bother me before the big thing did. One afternoon, as we stood by the truck reviewing my remaining deliveries, he said, "You have 4 left, right? 2 up canyon, 2 on the ridge." I frowned. I had not told him that. The manifest was folded in my pocket. My handheld was still on its clip inside the cab. "Lucky guess," he said when he saw my expression. "You've been running the same loop all week. Easy pattern." He was right. It could have been that. Except the next week, when my route changed completely, he still knew. "New cabin on the list," he said as he slid down an embankment to meet me. "Old logger's place, lot of junk in the yard. Be careful backing out. People disappear up that draw." He said it so casually that I nearly missed the last whole part. "Disappear how?" I asked. He shrugged. "Weather, bad choices, other people. Take your pick." After that day, I started filling out my end-of-shift reports in more detail. I wrote down when and where I ran into him, even though there was no box for frequent, helpful stranger. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just not used to someone taking that much interest in my work. The day it turned came heavy with fog. Low clouds draped the hills, beads of water clinging to the fir needles like sweat. The dispatcher had added a last-minute package to my route that morning, a small box for a unlisted cabin, coordinates attached. When I plugged the numbers into the handheld, they dropped like a pin into a blank corner of the map where the contour lines closed in tight. "Road used to be there," the dispatcher had said. "Might still be. If you cannot find it, bring the package back." I found Callum first. He was standing in the junction where my main road narrowed into a rutted spur, hands in his pockets, jacket dark with damp. "Was wondering when they would send someone down this way," he said. "You know this road?" I asked. "Better than your little gadget does," he said. "It will tell you it ends a mile in. It is wrong." I should have turned around. That is the part my therapist keeps circling back to. "You saw the sign," she says without saying sign, "and you drove past it anyway." "Cabin for these coordinates," I said, holding up the handheld. "You know it?" He did not look at the screen. "I know it," he said. "I will ride along, make sure you do not end up where you should not." He hopped into the passenger seat before I could protest, the way old friends do. He smelled like wet wool and wood smoke. As we drove, the fog thickened. Trees loomed out of it and vanished behind us. The road degraded from gravel to mud to something worse, deep ruts churning with brown water. "You sure this is the right way?" I asked. "Positive," he said. The handheld began to glitch. The little arrow that represented us jittered, jumped backwards, then spun in place. After a while, it gave up entirely, flashing "signal lost" in angry text. "Great," I muttered. "We must be under some kind of canopy." "Maps lie," Callum said. "Machines lie. The ground does not." He sounded almost pleased. We passed no driveways, no mailboxes, no signs of anyone living out here at all. The forest pressed close, branches scratching along the truck's sides like fingernails. The world narrowed to the twin beams of the headlights and the hood bucking under my hands. "I did not think there were still cabins this far in service," I said, if only to puncture the quiet. "Depends on what you mean by service," he replied. We rounded a bend, and the road simply ended. No turnaround, no clearing, just two ruts dissolving into undergrowth and the dark wall of the ravine beyond. I put the truck in park. "This is it?" I asked. Callum unbuckled his seatbelt slowly. "This is where the map says people stop existing," he said. "Question is which side of that you want to be on." He turned in his seat to face me fully. His eyes, normally a washed-out gray, looked almost black in the cab's dim light. "You run these routes alone," he said. "No partner, no dash cam, no one tracking you in real time. Company only cares that the packages get where they are going or come back with a reason why. You vanish out here, they will send someone else in a week, maybe two. They will mark the file unresolved and move on." He smiled, and it was the first time it did not reach his eyes at all. "Or," he continued, "you stop being cargo, and you start being someone who decides which trucks make it back to the depot. Who learns where the soft spots are? Who owes who favors? There is always room for one more person who knows how these roads really work." My mouth went dry. "Are you asking me to, what, help you rob trucks?" He laughed, a short, harsh sound. "You think this is about theft? Sometimes a truck is worth more empty. Sometimes someone wants a person to disappear without the fuss of city cameras and witnesses. These roads are good for that, have been for a long time. You have a choice. Be helpful or be missing." The package on the seat between us suddenly felt like a prop in a bad play. I forced my voice to stay level. "You think I did not tell anyone where I was going today?" He tilted his head, studying me. "You might have. Most do not." "I radioed dispatch before I came up this spur," I lied. Gave them the coordinates, told them I was with a local named Callum who offered to guide me. His jaw twitched just enough. "You should not lie so easily," he said softly. "It makes people wonder what else you are good at." Outside, the fog thinned for a moment, revealing a slice of sky. Somewhere far off, a chainsaw snarled to life, then cut out. The ordinary sound of work, but it threaded an anchor into me. "Either way," I said, fingers inching toward the gear shift, "they know I am late. They know where I am supposed to be. If I do not check in on schedule, someone will come looking." We both knew how thin that assurance was. Search areas out here were measured in drainages, not blocks. But it gave me enough courage to act. I slammed the truck into reverse and stomped the gas. The tires spun in the mud for a heartbeat that felt like an hour, then grabbed. The truck lurched backward. Callum grabbed the dash to steady himself. "You are making a mistake," he snapped. "So write me up with management," I said. "Tell them I ignored your helpful advice." branches screeched along the side as we bounced back down the spur. He did not try to grab the wheel. That scared me more than if he had. He just watched me drive, eyes flat and assessing, as if deciding whether I was worth the effort. At the junction, I cranked the wheel, got us back onto the main road, and did not stop until we hit gravel, then pavement, then the familiar, ugly box of the depot rising out of the mist. I wrote "Unreachable, Road Unsafe" on the package and dropped it on the clerk's desk. My hands shook so badly I had to sign my timesheet twice. I did not see Callum again after that. Not in person anyway. Sometimes, though, his absence felt more deliberate than an accident, like he had simply stepped sideways out of my route into someone else's. I quit 2 weeks later. Officially, it was because of better opportunities. Unofficially, it was because I started noticing how many small news stories began the same way. Local driver fails to return from rural route. Vehicle found abandoned on logging road. The kind of pieces that bubble briefly up the feed and sink under bigger headlines. When I drive in the city now, I still catch myself glancing at the mirrors more than most people. Not for cop cars or tailgaters, but for a shape in a faded green jacket standing at the edge of the road, hand raised in that easy, casual wave. I have learned to take the long way around any dead end. Out here, a road that looks like it just stops rarely does. It just keeps going where the maps decided people did not need to follow. I booked the trip to prove something to myself. After the breakup, everyone kept telling me I needed to get back out there, meaning dating apps, bars, parties. I chose a different out there. 3 nights solo on a popular loop in a Washington National Park, a route I had bookmarked years ago but never found time for. The kind of hike with enough day hikers to feel safe, enough miles to feel like I had done something hard. I did it the responsible way. I left a detailed itinerary with my sister. I checked in with a ranger at the backcountry desk. I printed out the map instead of trusting my phone. I reserved designated campsites along the loop, little numbered circles neat on the paper. The first 2 nights went so smoothly that by day 3 I was starting to feel cocky. My legs had remembered how to move. My pack felt like part of my spine instead of a punishment. I had even started to enjoy the quiet between trail chatter, the stretches where it was just me and the rhythmic crunch of my boots. That was the day I aimed for the hidden campsite. I found it on a forum post months earlier, buried in a thread about overlooked sites. Someone had written, "There is an old, unofficial spot off the main loop, still flat, still near water. If you know, you know." They had left half-joking coordinates that did not quite match any of the numbered sites on my official map. But they lined up with a small spur trail marker I had noticed on day 1. By the time I reached the junction, the sky was already softening into late afternoon. The official campground was another mile ahead, guaranteed company and bear hangs, and the easy comfort of other people's fires. The spur, in contrast, dipped into darker trees. I stood there for a full minute, pack digging into my shoulders, weighing the dull safety of the known against the small, prideful thrill of finding something secret. In the end, my ego won. The spur trail was narrower than the main loop, but still clearly used, pine needles tamped down by boots. After 10 minutes, the trees opened onto a small clearing so textbook perfect it might have been placed there by an outfitter. Flat ground, a ring of stones for a fire, a rough wooden bench made from a split log, initials carved along the edge. I dropped my pack and laughed out loud, a short burst of relief. I had half expected to find nothing, to be forced to backtrack to the official site by headlamp. Instead, here it was, exactly as promised. As I set up my tent, I noticed some of the initials on the bench were fresh, the wood still pale where it had been cut. One set stood out, J plus P, carved inside a crooked heart. The letters were deep, as if whoever had made them wanted to make sure they never faded. I cooked my dinner, hung my food bag from a likely-looking branch, and sat on the bench watching the light drain from the clearing. There was something cozy about the way the trees tucked in around the space, like walls in a tiny open-air room. I could hear the creek off to my left, the soft rush lulling and constant. I was zipping my sleeping bag when I heard footsteps on the trail. They were quick and light, not the heavy clomp of someone carrying a full pack. A second later, a woman's voice called, "Hey, is it okay if I come in?" A headlamp beam bobbed at the edge of the clearing. "Yeah," I said, sitting up. "Sure." She stepped into view, lowering the light so it would not blind me. She looked to be in her early 30s, about my age, with dark hair pulled back in a braid and a red bandana looped loosely around her neck. She held a small day pack, not nearly enough for an overnight stay. "Sorry," she said, giving me an apologetic smile. I was not sure anyone still used this spot. I have not seen it listed in years. "That is kind of the point, I guess," I said. "I found it from an old forum thread." Her smile widened. "Same. I am Josephine," she said. "Mind if I share the fire for a bit? I promise I am not a murderer." The line was so cliché it disarmed me. I stepped out of the tent and nodded to the log bench. "Go ahead. I am just glad to see someone else knows this place exists." We slipped into the easy talk that hikers have. Trail conditions, gear, the odd satisfaction of dehydrated meals. She knew the park well, rattling off alternate routes and little side lakes like someone who had been here many times. At some point, the conversation turned to solo hiking. She asked who knew where I was, how specific I had been with my itinerary, whether I had posted my plans on social media. It was framed as concern. A lot of people overshare, you know. It is not safe. But the questions themselves were precise. "Your sister knows the exact sites?" she asked. "Like this one too?" "Just the official ones," I said. I told her I might improvise a little if I found something cool. I heard myself say it and felt a flicker of doubt. Saying it out loud made it sound dumber. Josephine tilted her head. In the firelight, her eyes looked almost colorless. "So, hypothetically," she said lightly, "if you did not show up on schedule, they would start looking on the main loop." "I guess," I said. "There are only so many places to camp out here." "True," she said, "but there are more places than people think." A log shifted in the fire, dropping a spray of sparks. For a heartbeat, the clearing brightened. In that flash, her face looked wrong, not monstrous or deformed, just blank, like someone who had practiced making the right expressions without ever feeling them. The air felt suddenly colder. "What about you?" I asked, forcing my tone casual. "Who knows you are out here?" She smiled again, but did not answer that question. Instead, she leaned her elbows on her knees. "Do you ever think about how many people have slept right here?" she said, nodding. "At the tent pad. How many stories cross through one little patch of dirt? Weddings, breakups, people trying to get over something, people never making it back." It should have been a normal campfire musing, but the way she said people never making it back sat heavy in the air. I glanced at the bench. J plus P, sharp and new. "You were here with someone before," I said quietly. For the first time, her expression flickered. Then she laughed too quickly. "Everyone is here with someone before," she said. "That is what makes it a good campsite." We talked a little longer, but the rhythm was off. I felt like prey, trying not to look like prey. Eventually, she stood, brushing pine needles from her jeans. "I should head back," she said. "I am at one of the numbered sites. Friends waiting. You know how it is." "You hiked in with just that?" I nodded at her small pack. "Light and fast," she said. "I like to move." She stepped to the edge of the clearing, headlamp flicking back on. Just before she disappeared into the trees, she paused. "Hey," she said. "You did not post about this spot online, did you? Places like this get ruined when too many people know." "No," I said. "I did not." "Good," she said. "It is better when the forest chooses who finds it." I slept badly. Every creak of a branch sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind felt like breath on the tent wall. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke, the clearing was bright with mid-morning light. For a blissful second, everything felt normal. Then I stepped outside. There was no fire ring. The circle of stones, the blackened ash, the half-burned log. It was all gone. The ground where it had been was covered in undisturbed pine needles and tiny ferns, as if no one had built a fire there in years. The bench was gone too. In its place was a scatter of moss-covered rocks. My tent and my footprints were the only signs anyone had camped there at all. My heart hammered in my throat. I spun in a slow circle. The same trees ringed the clearing, but the space felt smaller, the walls closer. I grabbed my map and marched straight back to the ranger station without stopping to eat. The ranger at the desk listened politely as I explained. Old forum, hidden site, another hiker, vanishing campsite. My words tumbled over each other, half apology, half accusation. He unfolded a large laminated map and traced our loop with a blunt finger. "There used to be a few unofficial spots off that spur," he said finally. "We decommissioned them years ago. Too many impact issues. They are not on any current list. There should not be a fire ring there at all." "There was," I said. "And then there was not." He gave me the look people give when they suspect you are either very rattled or slightly unstable. "Sometimes folks move stones. Clean up old sites," he said gently. "Make it look like nothing was there." "In one night?" I asked, without leaving any sign. He hesitated, then changed tack. "You said the other hiker's name was..." "Josephine," I said. "Dark hair, red bandana, knows the park really well. She said she used to come here with someone else." Something shifted in his expression. "We had a missing person case 2 years ago," he said slowly. "Young woman, black hair. There was an unofficial site like you described where some of her stuff turned up. She was last seen with a partner. First name started with P. We never found them. We do not advertise that spot anymore." "Do you have a picture?" I asked. He shook his head. "Even if I did, I could not show you," he said. "Privacy. And it was a while ago. Memory can play tricks." I left the station feeling less anchored than when I had come in. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe there were a dozen women with dark hair and red bandanas who loved that loop. Maybe someone did haul away every rock and burned branch while I slept, out of some leave-no-trace zealot streak. Or maybe I had shared a fire with a story the forest was not finished telling. Back home, I deleted my old forum account. I stopped posting photos with geotags. When friends asked for route recommendations, I gave them the official campsites, the ones everyone knows. I never mentioned the clearing that was there one night and gone the next. Sometimes I think about the question Josephine asked me, the only one that seemed to really matter. Who knows exactly where you are? These days when I hike, I make sure the answer is always more than one person. I text when I leave the trailhead and when I get back. I stay where the maps say I should be. And if I ever stumble on another perfect little clearing that feels just a bit too eager to be found, I know now which way I will turn. People talk about summit fever like it is some dramatic thing, a madness that grips you near the top and makes you reckless. In my experience, it is much quieter than that. It is just the slow, creeping idea that turning back would mean all the weeks of training and gear and planning were for nothing. That is the thought that had been circling our group for 2 days on Mount Rainier when the voices started. There were 4 of us on that attempt. I was the least experienced, the one who still double-checked every knot like a nervous student. Then there was Mia, tough and wiry, who could climb all day and still crack jokes in the tent. Our guide was an older climber named Sam, patient in the way only people who have watched a lot of egos deflate at altitude can be. And then there was Rupert. If mountains could shape-shift into people, they would pick someone like him. Calm, methodical, solid. He never bragged about his experience, but every guide we passed on the lower glacier knew him by name. When he said a bridge was safe, you crossed it. When he said we were done for the day, you did not argue. The forecast had looked decent when we left Paradise. A small system brushing the upper mountain, winds increasing overnight, nothing unusual for that time of year. We made high camp in a basin that felt like a frozen bowl of light. Tents dug into snow walls, stoves roaring, headlamps bobbing like fireflies as teams moved through their routines. Above us, the upper slopes glowed faintly under a half moon, ridges and seracs cast in silver. Alarm at midnight, out by 1, Sam had said. If the wind is too bad, we reassess. The mountain will still be here next year. We all nodded. No one meant it. Sometime before the alarm, the wind arrived. It came first as a low hum in the tent fabric, then a full body shove, a hand pressing hard against every surface. Snow hissed past, grains rattling against the nylon like sand. The temperature dropped so fast, the moisture in our breath froze along the seams. Sam crawled out to check the lines and came back with his face stiff from cold. Gusts are ugly, he said. We watch for a window. Hydrate, but stay in your bags. No one is going anywhere until I say. I lay there in the dark, listening to my own breathing. The sound of other teams moving outside, zippers, muffled shouts, faded as more people made the same calculation. Not tonight. The walls of the tent bowed and flexed. Somewhere in the white noise, I drifted into the thin, unsatisfying half-sleep of altitude. What woke me was not the wind. It was a sound threaded through it. At first, I thought it was the fabric squealing on a different pitch. Then it came again, cutting cleanly across the gust. A high, raw scream. I froze. The others shifted in their bags. I heard Mia mutter something, a curse or a prayer. Another scream, closer this time. Human. Wordless, stretched to the point where it barely sounded like a person. Someone is out there, I said, my voice too loud in the tent. Sam's headlamp snapped on. Stay put, he said. Could be the wind playing tricks. Another scream answered him. This one carried something like words, shredded by the gusts. Help. Please. My heart punched against my ribs. Sam, I said, that is not the wind. He was already unzipping the vestibule, sticking his head out into the storm. A blast of cold air knifed in. He ducked back inside quickly, snow crusting his eyebrows. I do not see anyone, he said. Visibility is garbage. Sound carries weird up here. Could be from the root, could be lower. We rush out there blind, we become the rescue. Mia swallowed hard. We cannot just lie here while someone screams for help. We all looked at Rupert. He had been quiet so far, eyes open in the dim, listening like someone tuning an instrument. Another scream rose, catching on that same almost word. Help, stretched into something between a wail and a warning. He shook his head slowly. Listen to the timing, he said. It is riding the gusts almost exactly. Every time the wind drops, you hear it. That is not someone stumbling around camp. What else would it be? I asked. He did not answer. The radio crackled then, making all of us jump. A clipped voice came through, half buried in static. Hi, Camp. This is Ingraham. You hearing anything odd up there, over? Sam grabbed the handset. Copy that. We have been hearing something that sounds like calls for help. No visual. Any parties unaccounted for on your side? Over. Negative, came the reply. Everyone that went up is back in. Our folks are getting spooked. Some of them say it sounds like a woman. No female climbers on our ropes tonight. Over. We all went very still. Another scream tore across the ridge, higher than before, carrying a shape that made my skin crawl. It sounded like my name. Not perfectly. Like someone trying to remember it from a long time ago, syllables dragged out of a frozen throat, but close enough that my stomach lurched. Did you hear that? I whispered. Hear what? Mia asked. It said. I stopped. Saying it out loud felt like giving it weight. In my head, the sound replayed, and with it came a memory I had been careful not to dust off too often. Penelope, standing at the base of a different mountain years earlier, her cheeks red with cold, grinning at me over her shoulder. Relax, she had said. You worry enough for both of us. We had been caught in an avalanche 2 hours later. I had walked away with bruises. She had not walked away at all. The last thing I remembered of her was that same grin, swallowed in white. Another gust hit the tent. The scream came with it, dragging my name again, closer to recognizable. I must have made a sound, because Rupert turned to look at me fully. In the headlamp's glow, the lines on his face seemed deeper. Who is Penelope? He asked quietly. My mouth went dry. I never said her name, I managed. You did not have to, he said. You are not the first person to bring a ghost up here. Something in me wanted to argue, to tell him this was just stress and thin air twisting my thoughts. But there was a stillness in his gaze that cut through the noise. The mountain keeps stories, he said, of every time someone yelled into a storm and no one came. Sometimes, when the weather's right, it plays them back. Sometimes it mixes them with whatever you are already carrying. So those, Mia started, those could just be echoes, old calls. Could be, he said. Or maybe someone is out there right now and we cannot reach them without joining them. Either way, running around in this will not fix it. The radio squawked again. Another guide on another route reported hearing the same thing. No missing climbers, no tracks wandering away from camp. The night stretched. The screams came and went, never closer, never farther, always riding the drop in each gust. At some point they shifted, the rawness giving way to something more articulated. Phrases warped by distance. Why did you get to leave? You could have pulled me out. Do not go back down without me. Each accusation landed in my chest like a stone. They were not Penelope's voice, not exactly. But they wore her cadence, her rhythm. Or maybe they wore my guilt, molded into sound. I do not remember sleeping. At some point, though, exhaustion must have dragged me under. Because the next thing I recall clearly is Sam's voice. Sunrise, he said. Storm broke. Get up. We are not going higher today. We crawled out of the tent into a world scrubbed clean. The wind had dropped to a brisk breeze. The sky above the summit was clear, a cold, impossible blue. Other teams were emerging from their battered tents, radios in hand, faces drawn tight. The route above us was empty. No wandering figures, no collapsed silhouettes. When we scanned the slopes with binoculars, all we saw were wind-scoured ridges and the faint furrows of previous climbers' tracks already half filled in. The snow around camp told its own story. It was a mess of boot prints and crampon scratches, the busy script of a small, nervous village. Outside our tent, beyond the churned-up zone, the surface lay untouched, no lonely set of prints leading into the white. We all heard that silence in the same way, as proof and as accusation. Down at the ranger station hours later, reports trickled in. Different teams on different parts of the mountain had heard the same thing. Screams in the storm, sometimes male, sometimes female, sometimes sounding like people they had lost. No missing persons were filed, no abandoned camps discovered. Atmospherics, one ranger said. Sound bounce. People get spun up in bad weather, start hearing what they are afraid of. Happens more than you think, I nodded, because that explanation was the only one that let me sit still in my own skin. It is easier to believe your brain lied than to accept that a mountain might have a memory. We drove back to the city in near silence, the summit untaken. Everyone I told later chalked it up to stress. You made the right call, they said. No peak is worth dying for. The usual platitudes. I did not tell them that I almost opened the tent and walked out when I heard my name, that some part of me was halfway to unclipping from the rope before I even fully woke up. I did not tell them that the words I heard from the storm were the same ones I'd been saying to myself for years. Why did you get to leave? You could have pulled me out. Now, whenever a winter storm rolls over the city at night, the wind squeezing itself between apartment buildings, I lie awake and listen. It is a different sound than the high-altitude howl, tuned to brick and glass instead of ice and rock. But every so often, under the gusts, I think I hear a familiar edge, a stretched syllable that wants to become my name. I do not climb big mountains anymore. I tell people it is my knees or my schedule, or that I never loved the cold. The truth is simpler and harder to say. There is only so many times you can stand in a place that amplifies every unfinished story inside you. The mountain will still be there next year, just like Sam said. So will that storm, somewhere in its ridges, replaying itself for whoever happens to be high enough and hollow enough to hear it. I am not sure whose voices they will catch next. I only know that for once, I chose to walk away, while I could still tell the difference between the wind and the part of me that wants to answer it.